Mom treated me like a maid for years because I looked like my biodad. Later, when he gave me a pretty big inheritance, she's demanding a share. Even though she made my life hell, I, a 21F, have faced the worst punishment for resembling my biodad. I'm a result of my mom's affair. My mom was married to my stepdad for 10 years. She had 3 daughters, Mindy, 26F, Cece, 24F, 21F. Stepdad didn't know that I was not his child. As I grew older, I looked more and more like my biodad, and my stepdad got suspicious of my paternity. My elder sisters look like mom, so stepdad never questioned their paternity. But when I grew up looking very different from anyone in the family, he ran a paternity test on all 3 children. Mom's infidelity came out. Only the eldest daughter was stepdad's, and the rest, 2 of our DNA, didn't match his. Mom then confessed that the fathers of all 3 children were 3 different men. Stepdad served her divorce. He gave child support for only his daughter Mindy, and for Cece and me, Mom had to work hard. Mom loved Mindy and Cece unconditionally because they looked like her. She hated me because I uncovered her truth as a child. I never understood her wrath towards me. She was cheerful and loving with my half-sisters, but with me, she would only be grumpy and rude. I don't remember one happy moment with Mom. The sad part was I didn't know the reason until much later. When I got to know the reason, I was shattered. The truth made everything much worse. First, it gave me an identity crisis, and second, now I know the reason for my mom's hatred towards me, but I cannot do anything to fix it. Now I couldn't even complain about my mom's indifference towards me. She said Cece's dad and my dad refused to take our responsibilities, but at least Cece looked like Mom, so it didn't hurt her to provide for Cece. But I looked like my biodad, and it made her resent me. Mom and my half-sisters would gaslight the situation and blame me for their troubled life. I was being belittled openly, not only by my mom, but also by my sisters. Mindy called herself the legitimate one. She would call me names and blame me for her parents' divorce. Even Cece would mock me, saying that I looked like my biodad and I was the reason that tore the family apart. She was like, "Why couldn't you look like Mom? That could have saved us from getting abandoned by Dad." As if it was in my control to decide how to look as a child. I grew up hating myself, hating my blue eyes because they had brown eyes like Mom, hating my nose, hating my lips, hating every bit of my existence. The indifference continued for ages. I hardly got any new clothes. I grew up wearing Mindy's and Cece's clothes. Mom never bought any new toys for me, and neither was I allowed to play with my sister's toys. I was the unpaid servant of the house. I would have to bring them water and food from the kitchen, drop their plates into the sink, do their laundry, and even make their beds. Sometimes the only good thing Mom did for me was send me to school. It was a community school, but at least she got me educated. I ran away from home when I was 13, but the cops found me, and they dropped me back at Mom's. I told them I didn't want to go back home, and they would not listen. My mom sobbed in front of them that she was a single mom taking care of 3 daughters, and I was just a troubled kid, jealous of my sisters. I listed down all the tortures I had been through. The cops asked me if I was physically tortured, and I said no. The cops stopped noting my words. My mom said to the cops, "See, that's why I told you. She is a troubled kid, jealous of her sisters and nothing more." They didn't consider emotional exploitation a crime. They patted me and asked me to be a good kid, and left. After that, Mom and my half-sisters started hating me even more because I tried to report them to the cops. I can't explain how miserable it was. Staying at home became unbearable. So I took up part-time jobs. I babysat for neighbors, mowed lawns, worked at video stores, and did all sorts of jobs to keep myself away from my toxic family. Working outside was better than free labor at home. By then, I had become rebellious. I was earning money. I stopped taking their BS. I stopped eating at home and got my own food. Life got better after that, because now Mom wanted me back at home. She showed up at my workplace a couple of times and asked me to move back home, but I refused. It was not out of love, but for money. She said that instead of paying rent and living outside, I could pay her the rent and live with them. I laughed in her face. Living there for free was a nightmare, and do you think I'm going to pay to live with you all? You must be joking. I wanted to meet my biodad, but Mom wouldn't tell me about him. I asked Cece if she knew about her dad. She said Mom told her that her dad didn't want to meet her, so better not contact him. Mom had told me the same thing. I was suspicious that it couldn't be true, so I kept pestering her to tell me about my dad. But she is an awful woman and doesn't give in to any sort of pressure. 2 years back, she defaulted on her mortgage and needed money urgently. She reached out to me to borrow some money. I said I would give her the money only if she told me who my dad was. She told me his name and nothing more. I asked for his address. She said he didn't want me in his life, so no point in contacting him. I told her I wouldn't give her the money until she gave me all the details I needed. She then gave me his address. It was like 30 hours by road. If I took flights, I would need 2 connecting flights. I saved up for the flight and then showed up at the address, only to find it was the wrong address. I went back home and fought with my mom. I told her I would report her for not revealing my paternal details. She told me that she was reluctant to give me his address because his family didn't know about me and my visit would ruin his life. She tried to guilt-trip me into thinking that I wanted to be a homewrecker. After a lot of fighting, this time she gave me his office address, which was 4 hours away, but she kept insisting that I shouldn't visit him because he didn't want me in his life. She was like, "Why do you want to humiliate yourself? He's going to throw you out. He doesn't want to see your face." I didn't listen to her and took a bus to his workplace. When I finally met him, the moment was so surreal. I didn't have to introduce myself to him. He saw me and said, "My girl." He hugged me. That was the tightest hug I ever got from a family member. I got to know something that blew my mind. My biodad had been paying child support for all these years. Mom deliberately gave me his wrong address so that I wouldn't get to know the truth. She has been feeding lies to both of us. She told my biodad that I hated him and didn't want to meet him. It was true that his family didn't know about me. He told me he had been married for 40 years and had 2 grown-up sons. He loved his wife and didn't want to mess things up. My mom used it to blackmail him for money and took child support as well. He said we could meet outside and he could even provide for me if I wanted, but he didn't want to disclose me to his family. I didn't have a good feeling that he didn't want to accept me openly, so I never met him. After that, I was disheartened. He sent me several emails after that, but I never responded until almost 6 months later. He showed up at my workplace. He apologized and said he wanted to make things up to me. I said he didn't have to do anything for me. I didn't need anyone. Now I'm not 13 anymore. After meeting me, he said he didn't feel good about hiding me anymore and confessed everything to his wife and children. His sons are grown up and have moved out, so they didn't mind it much. However, his wife is in shock and they are seeking therapy together. He handed me a paper, which turned out to be an ownership document for a mansion. He said that's the only thing he could do to make up for his mistakes. I asked him if his family knew about this. He said yes. They knew he had paid for his son's college, and they are doing well for themselves. He has also left some trust funds for them and a house for their mother. And he gave his mansion to me. I was overwhelmed. I didn't know he was well-to-do. I didn't want his money. Otherwise, I would have also blackmailed him and extorted money for the last 2 years, as Mom did for 20 years. I told him how badly I had been treated my whole life. Because I looked like him, he said sorry for putting me through this. He had no idea that I was going through all that because Mom had been feeding him a different story. He said he was all set to get a share in that property. She is gaslighting me by saying that she is my mother and she had to undergo a divorce because of me, so I have to give her a share. When I denied it, she threatened to sue me because she had a right to my biodad's property. You see, I don't have any understanding of laws and rules around property and inheritance whatsoever. I'm guessing she can't have it, but sometimes the law works in a funny way in the States. I don't have money to hire a lawyer until the least money comes in. So if anyone has any idea about all this, kindly help. Yeah, you can call me dumb, but I need help. Thanks in advance. Update 1. Oh, I tell you, money works in a funny way. By the way, thanks for helping me out. I thought Reddit was for fun, but there are some really amazing people who genuinely help others. Like you all said in the comments, my mom can't claim a share in a house that was given to me by my dad. So the next time she came charging at me for the share, I went nuclear on her. She said she would sue me for this. I challenged her to do whatever she wanted. She cannot do anything except she screamed like a wounded lion. After the last confrontation with Mom, there was silence for a long time. I was not in touch with them. I sometimes bump into CC. She works in the same block as me, seeing how my luck played out for me after meeting my biodad. CC also forced Mom to reveal her dad's identity. Sadly, her dad turned out to be a German man who had moved back to his country. He used to be our neighbor for a few years. He had rented out a room in our neighbor's house. He was a student back then and knocked up Mom. After he got to know that Mom was pregnant and would ask him for child support, he fled. Cease contacted him through email, and he confessed everything. They are in touch. But Cece is sad that she didn't get any benefit. After discovering her dad, it makes me wonder if she wanted her dad or hit a jackpot. I hired an agency to get me a tenant for my mansion 6 days back. Someone from the agency called me. He said he brought a tenant to check out the mansion, and they found 2 women living there. I was horrified. They said they were the owners. They, with the tenants, chased them out. The agent told me that he had sent 2 to 3 prospective tenants during the last month, but mysteriously, they all ghosted him. After visiting the mansion, I asked him to send the pictures of those 2 women. They were none other than Mom and Mindy. I rushed to the place. It was an hour away from where I lived. Without saying a word, I started throwing their stuff out. They tried to stop me and kept saying, "Wait, we can explain, please hear us out." I screamed that I didn't want to listen to the squatters. It was 2 versus 1. It is a very peaceful neighborhood. The neighbors heard the chaos and called the cops. I didn't carry the house documents with me, but the agent had a copy, so he showed it to the cops. The cops chased them out, but also asked me to deploy security at the place. I asked them if I could get a restraining order against them. The cops said it was not easy, because Mom and Mindy had no previous felonies registered under their names. It was their first-time nuisance, so they could get away with it. I called up my dad and told him everything. Of course, I didn't have the money yet to deploy security. He has taken the matter into his own hands. He said he would be installing more cameras around the house. There was just one installed until now. He said he would get a tenant for me and that I wouldn't have to deal with it anymore. That was such a relief because I had no idea how tenant agreements worked, etc. I have not heard from the squatters since then. But let's see how long it's going to be like this. I'm sure they are going to come back. I'll update the thread if something develops. But thanks for putting up with me. Update 2. Hello all. Sorry for not updating it often. Life has been busy in college. Yeah, a lot has happened over the last few months. Let me get straight to it. 2 weeks later to the last incident, Mom and Mindy showed up at my door again. This time they looked miserable. They said they were homeless. Mom lost her job and they defaulted on 2 months of rent, so the owner locked them out. They said they had nowhere to go, so they went to the mansion to live there. After getting kicked out from that property, they have been living here and there. I raised you for 18 years, and this is how you pay me back. This is how you treat your mom who raised you single-handedly? I screamed at her. Yes, you raised me, but not as a daughter, but as a housemaid. I was no more than a servant for the 3 of you. Did you ever get me new clothes or anything for that matter? Everything I own was passed on to me by Mindy of CCE. I always got the leftover food. I survived on the stale food from last night while you all ate the fresh food. If there were 3 slices of anything, you 3 would eat, and I would just get the side salad or the ketchup. I did most of the household chores, yet you never showed any love or care for me. Even when I was sick, you were mean to me. Only when my condition worsened did you get me over-the-counter meds. Once, I even got an allergy because of that. Remember, it could have been fatal and I could have died because of unprescribed meds. But you care the least about my existence. This is how you raised me. The funny part is, it was not even my fault. How is it my fault that I look like my dad? It's your fault that you cheated on your husband. You got knocked up by a random man, and I had to suffer. I gave her the yellings of her life. My blood was boiling with rage. The hatred and pain which had accumulated for so many years came out like a flood. They sobbed at my rant. I broke down and howled. They came to console me, but I shooed them away. I told them to back off. They are the ones who have given me lifelong pain. They were still standing there thinking I would cool down and give in to their demands, but I screamed at the top of my voice, "Get out! I don't want to see your effing faces." I cried so badly after they left that I felt sick. The next day I went to the doctor, took meds, and rested for a couple of days. 2 to 3 days later, I was feeling lethargic and bored. I took my car and went around town for a drive. I passed by my mom's house and found the house was locked, and some of their belongings were lying outside. I am friends with one of the girls in the neighborhood. I called her to ask what's the matter. She told me that my mom had goofed up. She had been sleeping with her landlord, and the owner's wife got to know about this. She came charging at Mom and dragged her out of the house. Mom was not paying the rent for over a year. She was trading that off by sleeping with the owner. It's a small town. Everyone knows everyone's business. I hate to say this because she's my mom, but this woman is such a... Anyone reading this would think it is such a bizarre situation. Trust me, it's all true. I know this is hard to believe for people with normal parents, but, you know, not everyone is blessed with a normal family. There are people like us. As I mentioned earlier, my dad took over the responsibilities of getting the tenant for the house. I used that money to get into college. It's not a fancy one, but I am proud of myself for being able to come this far in life. Meanwhile, my mom tried to seduce my biodad, but he chased her out and threatened to report her to the cops if she was ever found near my mansion. I haven't heard from Mom after the last outburst. Cece texts me sometimes. I got to know from her that Mindy had also abandoned Mom after marrying a guy from the next block. He was a widower with 2 kids but had a big house and some ancestral properties. Of course, Mom has passed on her traits to Mindy. Good for them. Now, on to the next story. Story 2. I caught my wife of 14 years cheating with a mutual friend. She brought him to her home. Now her family has cut her off and spends holidays with me and our boys. Instead, my wife 38F and I 47M were together for roughly about 17 years. About 14 of those were spent with us married. When we first met, I thought she was older than she was. It was just the mature aura she gave off. She thought I was younger, which at the time did make me feel pretty good. After we decided that the age difference didn't matter, we went all in on the relationship. I was still a little hesitant about the age difference, but then I met her family. Her family was very big, bigger than mine. I'd always wished I had grown up in a close, tight-knit family. I'm the first to admit that her family, who welcomed me with open arms, is a huge factor in my continuing calm. Our wife didn't get the memo because she didn't hold herself to the same standards. My wife seemed focused on our marriage and family at first, but slowly she started to become a very shallow and self-centered person. She didn't put the kids first or even consider me. I tried my best to accept these behavior changes and keep putting the work into our marriage. It all came crashing down on Memorial Day of all days. I was getting the boys ready for the holiday party when I heard my wife's muffled voice from the bathroom talking to someone. My curiosity got the best of me, and I ended up standing there listening. I couldn't hear who was on the other end of the phone, but I heard her. She was telling whoever she was on the phone with that she loved them, couldn't wait to be with them, and that every day she spent with her husband, me, took a little part of her soul. So I waited for her to come out of the bathroom when she realized I had heard what she said on the phone. She was in shock. My wife didn't say anything at first. I asked if she was cheating, and she stuttered, trying to come up with some lame excuse. I told her to save it and walked out because I had a party to get to. My boys having a good holiday was my main focus. That was D-Day for me, and it's safe to say that the holiday is going to be sullied for me shortly. I'll never let my boys know because I want them to enjoy the holiday and spend time with family. The reason I still attended with my kids was to keep up appearances. It was very hard to keep a smile on my face, but again, I did it for the boys. They will always be who I put first in all of this. My wife didn't go with us. She decided to go straight to the app for comfort. Ironically enough, when she finally came home from her app, I asked her what happened. According to my soon-to-be ex-wife, I lacked passion and didn't show her any attention. I repulsed her, as she lovingly pointed out to me. She managed to say all of this while trying to butter me up with compliments about being a trusting husband, great provider, and father. I just was a terrible husband. However, she wanted to stay married and keep living in the marital home while remaining with her app. I was shocked by that. My wife wanted her cake and to eat it too. She gets the stability of remaining with me and the apparent passion with this jerk she cheated on me with. Speaking of the app, I knew the guy. He had been over to my house and I'd even hung out with him. The guy knew everything that was going on. I was busy working and coaching sports teams for our sons while she was screwing around with him behind my back. After the shock wore off, I realized I had to file for divorce. It should be done by the end of the year, which is getting closer and closer by the minute. She was against it and tried to convince me we could stay married. If not for us, then because of the boys. They deserve to be raised in a two-parent household. I'm not going to lie. I nearly burst out laughing when she said this. I was tempted to do it for a moment, but then I realized it wasn't fair to my boys to do that. I didn't want to stay in a terrible relationship, just for their sake. This wasn't something I wanted to emulate for them. If they ever, God forbid, found themselves in this position, then I would want them to retain some dignity and do what was best for them and their family. Besides, kids pick up on more things than we realize. I've learned this since my boys started therapy to deal with the situation. I'm also in therapy before you ask, so don't worry. My mental health is also being worked on. When news of the affair reached our friends and family, it didn't go the way she expected. Her own family didn't rally around her. Instead, they rallied around me, which I cannot begin to say was a huge help in the healing process because I feared I might lose my in-laws in the divorce process. The funny thing is, her boyfriend isn't allowed anywhere at her parents' house or any family functions, while my boys and I are more than welcome. She refuses to attend without the app, so she and her family have no contact. I talk more to her mother than she does. Now they used to talk 2 times a day, but now the contact is non-existent. For the holidays this year, my boys and I were gladly invited. I'm going to go not just for the sake of my boys, but also because I enjoy being around the family. Recently, it seems that even our acquaintances are beginning to see through my wife's crap. There was a youth night at the high school football game that I attended with my boys. They get to go out on the field at halftime and get hates. After my wife left, I had 4 different sets of parents come up to me and mention something about how she stayed just long enough to get her pictures for social media. It was hard not to burst out laughing. Let me tell you, it felt really good that people could see through her crap, that she's only playing up the mom of the year stuff for Instagram, Facebook, or whatever other social media she's on. We'll always have to remain in some contact because of our boys. One is still in the single digits. Mind you, I'm just glad other people can see who she is. And when it comes down to it, she's going to put herself first, and not me or the boys. In the meantime, I'll keep taking care of my boys and myself. I've started going back to the gym, picked up some of my old hobbies again, and reconnected with old friends. I can safely say I've never been happier. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more.